You are one of those lucky people that can travel anywhere.
Yes, ma'am, I know.
And they sometimes call you nomads.
My mom says that you're homeless. Is that true?
No, I'm not homeless. I'm just houseless. Not the same thing, right?
No.
My husband worked at the USG.
Welcome to Funky Flicks Film Reviews, and today we're going to talk about Nomadland. Nomadland is a film about elderly and near elderly American citizens setting off on the road in the wake of the 2008 financial collapse in search of seasonal work. And it's based on the novel Nomadland: Surviving America in the 21st Century by Jessica Bruder. Frances McDormand plays Fern, the central character, who tricks out a van that she picks up from somewhere into a living space and leaves the town of Empire that she's been living in for many, many years after it's completely decimated by the closure of the local mine, and heads off on the road in search of seasonal work. The first gig she gets, among the many jobs she gets over the course of the film, the first gig she gets is an Amazon fulfillment center. The Amazon gig is something with a short shelf life, being seasonal work. But while there, she meets a fellow elderly nomad called Linda, who invites her to this place out in the desert, for this rendezvous of fellow nomads. And though she's a little reluctant at first, circumstances make it necessary for her to accept the invitation, and along she goes to discover effectively her tribe. They get fed and they share what they don't need with those who might need it and get something back. And it's the place where she discovers there is a positive to her new lifestyle. But this too is short-lived. Pretty soon Fern finds herself on the road again, still new to this, still learning what she's doing, still learning how to navigate the road, navigate surviving the road, navigate finding jobs. And while all this is going on, she meets many other fellow nomads, played by real people, but also McDormand's character Fern begins to form a very careful, emerging friendship and maybe possible romance with fellow traveller Dave, played by David Strathairn. Over the course of the movie, we get to know Fern's past, in particular the fondly remembered life she shared with her now deceased husband. And we get to know her sense of humour, we get to know who she is in terms of dealing with a crisis, in terms of her resilience. We know that she's an educator. We get to know a lot about her, but just as importantly, we get to know the people she meets with a rare intimacy. Nomadland, to my mind, is more or less a Western, but in the pioneer sense at the heart of all Westerns. And there are films that of a similar nature that you could conjure up in your head, that, the likes of Sidney Pollack's Jeremiah Johnson in Rhythm and Narrative, or The Grapes of Wrath in Similarity of Circumstance. Let's say Under the Skin in Technique, I guess, Jonathan Grazer's Under the Skin in Technique. Or Into the Wild, Sean Penn's Into the Wild, tonally has similarities. What I would say about Chloe Zhao's film here, what I would say about Chloe Zhao's Nomadland, is that it doesn't really remind me of anything. It's unique, and that's probably the best compliment you can give any film. There are actual, real elderly nomads who have lived this life in the film. It's the majority of the cast is that, or the majority of the featured cast is that, outside of McDormand and David Strathairn. Most of them are nomads, and they're, these are not actors, these are real people. And they're embedded in the narrative. They don't just pop up. They're embedded in the narrative, and Frances McDormand tunes into their flow because it's their story, effectively. At no point does McDormand lean on, big actory flourishes. She instead sort of, gets into this engaging calm, and like all of the stress is underplayed. It's subtly played to give you this sense of a real person. Now, to blend a sense of documentary with docudrama usually ends up with this kind of jarring effect where the two don't entirely come together. And it doesn't often, it can be, sometimes it can work despite that, but you'll always see the seams a little bit. And you see this every now and again in this film, but mostly it pulls it off better than I usually see it. Apparently, McDormand and Zhao both lived out of vans for the entirety of production in order to sort of tune in to what it's like to live that way. There's a lot of really clever ways in which they've kept a sense of plausible reality going on. For example, like when they bring in David Strathairn, who's a hugely widely known actor. People who've, might not even know his name, but they've seen him in things. Just as they'd know Frances McDormand. Frances McDormand is established from the very beginning, so David Strathairn has come in as a supporting character. So rather than just, oh look, there's a movie actor, he's off in the distance when we first meet him. He's there with the other actual nomads, and he's sort of organically brought into the narrative really, really nicely. The cinematography by Joshua James Richards captures the, Nevada, Arizona, and Dakota, I think it's South Dakota, mountains and landscape, as any good Western should, with a sense of awe and inspiration. The score by Ludovico Einaudi, it's beautifully understated. There's a bit of piano here and there, some strings, but he stays within the tone of the film. That's it, solid score. But interesting enough, there's more music by other people within the film. There's a party where you've got people singing covers of things that are, I think whatever way, it feels like a real kind of karaoke type thing, or, live bands. There's a guy, I think his name's Donnie Miller, does a bit of fourth wall breaking as he performs to camera while playing the piano and singing away. And David Strathairn's son, Tay, who is a musician by trade, puts together a piece of music for a pivotal, like really emotive piece of music for a pivotal scene. So there's a sense of everybody being involved. There are several intimate moments with different characters. Two in particular really stuck in my mind, but they're framed like these are the real people now talking about something like their own experiences, but also a kind of, the tale you have to weave when you're telling a fictionalized interpretation of a story for artistic license. But the real experience of these characters is present on their faces, framed, their heads filling the screen like mountains. And there are several of them. Two really come to mind, but there are several of them. And, really starkly, no hint of glamour here, as these people, these real people, tell their and the narrative's tale. And you get a sense of real loss and a sense of real hope. I've not seen Chloe Zhao's other two feature films. The Songs My Brother Taught Me and The Writer, both of which are about the modern Native American experience. And it's a subject I am somewhat fascinated with, because it has been, I think it's fair to say, criminally underdeveloped, a piece of Americana mythology by, cinema in America. And if she's utilized the same kind of subtlety and depth and lightness of touch that she's utilized here, I'll probably enjoy these two films very much. By the time I got to the end of this film, I felt like I'd spent, after just under 2 hours, I'd been on some sort of surreal odyssey through the actual wilderness with Fern and the other people that she encounters. And it felt like I'd been there with some very, very good company. It felt like I'd really been there. And maybe it was the long time away from the cinema, or maybe it was just because it was so beautifully shot, or the fact that you were tuned, that Chloe Zhao tuned you so well into the, what it is she's trying to say. But I could sense that the film was about to end, and it was a natural conclusion. And it was this beautiful shot where I wanted them to just freeze frame it so I could run up onto the screen and go in and check out the mountains. And I realized, I probably have watched Buster Keaton's Sherlock Jr. a few too many times. Mind you, how much does a van cost? 4x4. Roomy. Wow. Okay. That is not a bad price. Hey, look, that's my retirement sorted. But between now and then, whatever you end up watching, and wherever you end up watching it, I hope it's worth talking about.
You ever tried poems?
Can't say I have. Do you know any?
How about one that I used for my wedding vow when I was not much older than you?
Oh, right on. Mind if I hear it?
Okay, let's see if I can remember it. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely, more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometimes declines by chance or nature's changing course undimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou walkest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe and eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee.
Beautiful.